And we're back. Yes, the video cut out midway through the last taping, just as I was getting near the dangerous part. So I've got another device here. I haven't quite figured out what went wrong with the other one, but we're going to finish up the last video. This will be part B of that. In the meantime, I did glue this on her. Like I said, I'm going to use that later. And what I was doing, basically, I was just using that paint bottle to hold it in place until the glue dried. That's just a little practice I like to do. But like I said, we are going to do the dangerous part now of this. I got this guy. I had just finished drilling his arm satisfactorily, and just before I said that, the video cut out. But here's where the dangerous part comes in. Basically, I'm going to have to cut my wire. And I call this the dangerous part because these clippers, when you cut this, you're putting pressure on it. The end will shoot out. It's just under force. It's going to shoot out. This is one of those things you don't want children to do alone. I mentioned yesterday I had a kit which had this, very thick wire as opposed to this. And that it took more force to cut, and the more force it takes to cut, the farther the piece is going to fly. And I lost a few bits of metal in my carpeting, which later didn't find until I was walking around barefoot. So I suggest for something like this, you get a box, or in this case I'm just going to use a plastic bag, and you cut it in there just so when the piece flies off, it's going to get caught in something. And I'm sort of estimating the depth of my holes here. I'm going to cut. And there it just shot off into the bag. Retrieve it. And just to be on the safe side, we're going to take this. We're going to make sure it fits in our hole, which it does. And we're going to take our other bit, and we're going to just see how well it fits. Come on. And there, I cut it a little too long, so my options are drill the holes a little deeper or cut it again. I'm going to do a little of both. See, this is one thing I don't like about pinning, is if you use too narrow or too small of a object to pin, your pin is too short, then it's just hard to handle. I'm going to cut this again. This time I held on to the piece that I needed, so let the slag go off. And we're going to just put this back in there. See, as you can see, I made my pin shorter, and it's harder for me to handle. When it comes time to actually glue that in place, it's going to be even harder to handle, and I'm going to have glue, trying to keep glue off my hands, trying to keep glue off the pin. Just getting it in the holes more difficult. This is one of the things I don't like about pinning, is just, this, with the figure I'm using, I could have done a nice deep hole and just used a nice long pin. And I'll be honest, I wouldn't even be doing this video if I hadn't found a good figure that would be easier to do than most of what I've had to pin in the past. There you go. That works good. And I'm just going to leave that in there. And the rest is just very simple. We just take our glue. I am using glue. Like I said, I don't like to use glue normally, but in this case I'm going to. I let it on there. It's going to just run down some. And then I'm going to take this bit and I'm going to put that on there. And we're going to hold it in place for a while, wait for the glue to dry some. One thing I mentioned earlier is glue. Super glue, in my opinion, it doesn't glue as fast, or it doesn't harden as fast as most people say it does. That's been my experience with it. In this case, it works pretty well. But, it's going to depend on the brand of glue you use. I think I'm using a brand I don't normally use, so, maybe I just got a better brand. I'm still going to sort of put some bottles around him to hold him up. And so that's pinning. And I will, he'll be dry, ready to paint in maybe a day or so. He will be back in a future video showing that. His friend, I will probably pin and glue his arm on the other figure just to be doing it since I have this extra arm sitting around. But that is it for that. I did mention that I'm going to try something a little more risky. Those of you who play Pathfinder will probably recognize. I got to move some stuff around here. Pardon me while I shift the camera and stuff around. Like I said, this new device I'm using isn't really designed. I'm got it wedged up between some books, and so it's going to slip around some when I try this. That's better. I'm just going to lean against this book. Those of you who've played Pathfinder will be familiar with... That's not even coming up good. Urgathoa. She is one of the deities in Pathfinder. She's got this real weird-looking sculpt, which, you're never going to get anyone to make. But one of my intentions is to take these parts I found and try to do a modification of her. And one thing, if you remember from last time around, I mentioned that this would be something I'd do off camera because I didn't want you to hear me cursing and all, because this is going to be difficult sculpt to do. I mean, I've got all sorts of weird stuff I got to deal with. The fact that the only two good figures I could find with scythes are holding them in the opposite hand that she is, so I have to decide if I want to reverse the image and do this or just put an arm on backwards and hope nobody notices. I'm going to have to do a lot of, sculpting work. Where's the body I was going to use? I can't even find the body I was going to use. Well, I probably left that somewhere else. But, oh, there it is. I was going to use her. So, her body, I'm going to have to sort of cut it off at the waist and then drill up into it to make room for the spine to go in. I'm going to have to change the hairstyle a little bit on some of these just to get a head on there. The legs, I'm either going to have to, these were designed basically so they could stand. I'm either going to have to change the pose of the legs, or I'm going to have to risk it falling over, or I might just run a wire up one of the legs just to give it a little extra support. It's something I've never done a lot of modding, so it's going to be a learning experience for me. Whoop, there goes my camera again. Here are the parts I'm going to use to do it. But, like I said, that's sort of why I started this in the first place. Years ago, I saw people painting. I thought I could never do that. And then I turned around and I tried it, and I could do it. And so one of the reasons I'm making these videos is to get more people interested in painting and testing themselves, seeing what they can do. So I'm hoping that this mod will come out right. I see 4 possible outcomes, all of which, whichever comes out I will show. Either I do a very good sculpt, I do a very poor sculpt, I do a half, I have time to do it halfway, or I will have a pile of parts sitting there and I will just have to give up. And if I have to give up, I have to give up. No matter what the outcome is, I will show it to you guys. And that's it for now. Like I said, this is a very short one. It's a continuation of the last one, which just didn't finish on time because the device I was using, it just stopped recording. So this will be part B of that one. And good night, and I will see you hopefully in a week with a partially completed at least Urgathoa. And good night.